They kept cutting my trees without asking. So eventually, I found a way to cut something of theirs back. And no, I don't mean branches. I mean the number they were counting on when they sold that house. Funny thing is, when it all started, I wasn't looking for a fight. I'm not that guy. I like quiet mornings, coffee on the back porch, watching the light move through the leaves like it's got nowhere better to be. That was kind of the whole point of the place. I'd lived there close to 12 years, small town just outside Columbus, nothing fancy but steady, the kind of neighborhood where people wave even if they don't remember your name. The best part of my property, no contest, was the row of old oak trees lining the back fence. 6 of them, tall and thick, easily older than the house itself, maybe older than the whole block. In the summer, they'd throw this wide blanket of shade across my yard, cooled everything down, gave the place a kind of calm you can't buy or fake. I took care of those trees, had them checked every couple years, trimmed properly, nothing aggressive, just enough to keep them healthy. Then in early spring, the house next door sold. Now, I didn't think much of it at first. Places turn over, people move, that's just how it goes. A week later, a moving truck showed up, big one, out-of-state plates, and a family stepped out like they were stepping into a project instead of a home. Husband, wife, 2 kids, maybe 8 and 10. The husband introduced himself a couple days later when I was out front dragging the trash bins back in. His name was Aaron Cole. Firm handshake, quick smile, but his eyes were already scanning the house, the yard, the edges, like he was measuring things. He said something like, "We're planning to fix this place up, give it a fresh start." I nodded, told him welcome to the neighborhood, kept it polite. But there was something about the way he said fix it up, not like he wanted to live there, more like he wanted to finish it. About 2 weeks later, I noticed the first cut. It wasn't obvious at first, just a branch missing from one of the oaks near the fence line. I figured maybe it had snapped in the wind. We'd had a small storm the night before, nothing crazy, but enough to knock things loose. But when I got closer, I saw the cut was clean. Too clean. No splintering, no tear, just a straight slice like it had been done with a saw. I stood there a minute, hand on the bark, just staring at it, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. Then I walked the line, and that's when I saw the rest. Not 1 branch, not 2, at least a dozen. Some small, sure, but a few of them, thick, heavy limbs, the kind you don't just casually remove. And here's the part that got under my skin, they weren't all on his side. A couple had been cut well past the property line, deep into my side of the trees. I remember feeling this slow, creeping irritation, not explosive, just building, like a pressure you don't notice until it's already there. So I did what most people would do. I walked over and knocked on his door. Aaron opened it after a few seconds, phone in one hand, like I'd interrupted something more important. I said, "Hey, quick question, have you been cutting branches off the oak trees along the fence?" He didn't even hesitate. "Yeah," he said, like we were talking about mowing the lawn. They were hanging over into my yard, blocking sunlight. I blinked at him for a second, just making sure I heard him right. "Okay, I get trimming what's on your side, but you cut branches on my side too." He shrugged, actually shrugged. "It's the same tree," he said. "Doesn't really make a difference." That right there, that flipped a switch. I kept my voice even, but tighter now. "It does make a difference. Those are my trees. You can't just cut into them without asking." He leaned against the doorframe, like this was already boring him. "Look, anything that crosses the property line is fair game. That's how it works." I said, "On your side, sure. Not mine. And definitely not like this, not that close to the trunk." He gave this little half smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "They're trees, man. They'll grow back." And before I could say anything else, he pushed the door closed. Not slammed, just ended. I stood there on his porch for a second longer than I should have, listening to the click of the latch, feeling that pressure in my chest tighten a little more. I went back to my yard, looked at the cuts again, and this time I wasn't trying to explain them away. I knew exactly what they were. And more importantly, I knew they weren't done. That night, I barely slept. Not because of the trees, not really, but because of what it meant. It wasn't about sunlight or branches. It was about boundaries, about someone deciding, without asking, that what was yours didn't matter as much as what they wanted. The next morning, I called an arborist. His name was Dave, older guy, been working with trees longer than I'd probably been alive. He showed up in this beat-up truck, took one look at the cuts, and just shook his head. "Whoever did this," he said, running his hand along one of the wounds, had no idea what they were doing or didn't care. He pointed out how close some of the cuts were to the trunk, how uneven they were, how they could open the tree up to disease, rot, all kinds of problems down the line. He said one or two might recover fine, but others, it was a gamble. I asked him straight, "Are they going to die?" He paused, then said, "Not today, but you've increased the odds." He wrote up a report, estimated treatment costs, potential loss if one or more trees didn't make it. The number came out to around $2,800, give or take depending on how things progressed. I stared at that number for a while after he left. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I shouldn't have to. So I did the reasonable thing. I wrote Aaron a letter. Kept it calm, factual, included Dave's report, explained the damage, asked him to cover the cost of treatment and to stop cutting anything beyond his side of the line. I even walked it over and left it in his mailbox myself. Then I waited. A day passed, then 3, then a week. Nothing. No knock on the door, no text, no apology, not even a denial. Just silence. And that's when I started to realize this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of something else. And I had a feeling it was about to get worse. It got worse about 2 weeks later, early in the morning, the kind of quiet where sound carries farther than it should, and I remember waking up not all at once, but in pieces, first the vibration, then the noise, that sharp, mechanical whine that doesn't belong in a neighborhood at 7 a.m. I knew what it was before I even opened my eyes. Chainsaw. I threw on a hoodie, didn't even bother with shoes, just stepped straight out into the backyard, and there he was, Aaron, standing near the third oak from the corner, ear protection on, saw in hand, already halfway through a major limb. Not trimming, not careful, just cutting like he was clearing brush. I shouted, "Hey," louder than I meant to, my voice cracking through the noise, and he glanced over, annoyed, like I was the interruption. He killed the saw, but only because I was right there now, walking fast, heart already pounding. "What are you doing?" I said. He wiped his forehead with the back of his glove, calm as ever. "Finishing what I started. These trees are still blocking light." I looked up at what he'd already done and felt something drop in my stomach. One of the trees, he'd topped it. Just cut the crown straight off, left it blunt and uneven, like a broken bone sticking out of the sky. "You can't do that," I said, and this time there was no calm left in my voice. "That's not trimming, that's destroying it." He shrugged again, same shrug, same indifference. "It'll grow back." I stepped closer, probably closer than I should have. "No, it won't grow back the same. You're killing it." He gave me that same half smile. "Then maybe you should have taken better care of it." That line, that one stayed with me. I didn't yell after that. I didn't threaten, didn't escalate. I just stood there for a second, looking at the tree, then back at him, and something in me shifted, not louder, not angrier, just colder. "Don't touch them again," I said quietly. He didn't answer, just put the ear protection back on and restarted the saw. So I walked away, not because I was giving up, but because I realized something important in that moment. Standing there watching him butcher something I'd taken care of for over a decade, this wasn't about talking anymore. This was about consequences. I called Dave again that afternoon. He came out, took one look at the top tree, and just let out a long breath through his nose. "Yeah," he said, "that one's in trouble." He explained it in detail, how topping stresses the tree, how it forces weak, rapid growth, how it opens pathways for disease. Said even if it survived, it would never look the same, never be structurally sound like it was. I asked him to update the report. He did. The number went up. I didn't send another letter. Instead, I started digging. Now, I'm not some investigator. I don't spend my nights tracking people online. But Aaron had given me something to work with, that comment about fixing the place up, the way he looked at the house like a project. So I did a simple search, just his name and the city. Didn't take long. His LinkedIn popped up first. Real estate development. A few buzzwords about value optimization, property turnaround, strategic renovations, the usual language people use when they're flipping houses for profit. Then I found a couple of older listings tied to his name, before and after photos, timelines, sale prices. That's when it clicked. He wasn't planning to live next door. He was planning to sell. And suddenly, everything made sense. The urgency, the cutting, the disregard. To him, those trees weren't part of a home. They were obstacles, things blocking light, blocking curb appeal, maybe even blocking a higher price. I leaned back in my chair that night, staring at his profile, and thought about that. About how he saw value, and how fragile that value really was. If there's one thing I've learned living where I do, it's that property value isn't just about paint and flooring, it's about compliance. Permits, codes, inspections, paper trails, the stuff most buyers don't see until they do. So I started there. The next morning, I called the city's code enforcement office. I kept it simple, told them I had concerns about unauthorized tree work on protected trees, asked what the process was. The woman on the phone asked for the address, paused for a second, then said, "Those oaks, do you know their diameter?" I gave her an estimate. Another pause. "Yeah," she said, "those would fall under protected status. Any major trimming or removal requires a permit." I thanked her, hung up, and put together everything. I had photos of the cuts, Dave's report, proof of where the property lines sat, dates, timestamps. I wasn't angry while I did it. I was methodical. I submitted the complaint that afternoon. About 4 days later, a city truck pulled up in front of Aaron's house. I watched from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, as a code enforcement officer walked the perimeter, took photos, measured the trunks, made notes on a clipboard. Aaron came out halfway through, tried to talk, gestured a lot, but the officer just nodded, kept writing. They spoke for maybe 10 minutes. Then the officer handed him something, a citation, I figured, and left. That evening, I saw Aaron in his driveway. He didn't wave this time, didn't smile, just looked over at my house for a second, long enough to know he'd connected the dots. I held his gaze for a moment, then went back inside. A week later, I found out the result. $1,500 fine, and a warning about further violations. For most people, that might have been enough. A message sent, boundary reestablished, call it even. But here's the thing. He hadn't just ignored me. He'd doubled down. And now I knew what he cared about. So I kept going. I went down to the county records office in person, one of those quiet buildings that smells like paper and time, and I pulled the property file on his house. Took a while, flipping through documents, permits, past transactions, but eventually I found something interesting. Actually, more than something. Several things. There was a deck out back. Nice looking, recently built, listed in the sale description. No permit on file. Finished basement, also listed as a feature. No permit. I cross-referenced a couple of things, dates, contractor names, and it became pretty clear the previous owner had done work without approval, and Aaron had either missed it or hoped no one would notice. I remember sitting there at that desk, fingers resting on the edge of the file, just thinking about how easy it would have been for him to avoid all of this. One conversation, one bit of respect. But that's not the path he chose. So I made a call, then another. And just like that, things started moving. Inspectors don't rush, but they're thorough. And when they show up, they don't just look at one thing. When the inspectors showed up, it wasn't dramatic. No sirens, no big scene. Just 2 city vehicles pulling in on a gray Tuesday morning. The kind of day where everything feels a little heavier than usual. And I remember standing at my kitchen sink again, same spot as before, watching it unfold like a quiet storm you know is going to hit whether anyone's ready or not. They started outside first, walking the perimeter, checking the deck, measuring, taking photos, talking in low voices. Then they knocked and went inside. And they were in there for a long time. Long enough that even from across the yard, you could feel something wasn't going the way Aaron expected. At one point, I saw him pacing through the living room window, phone pressed to his ear, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to undo what had already been done. They came back out eventually, handed him paperwork, more than one sheet this time. And you could tell just by the way he held it that it wasn't good news. That afternoon, I got confirmation through the same office I'd called before. Multiple violations. Unpermitted deck that didn't meet structural code. Electrical work in the basement that hadn't been inspected. Plumbing modifications without approval. And the big one. The basement itself didn't meet egress requirements, which meant legally, it couldn't be counted as a finished living space at all. Now, if you've never dealt with that kind of thing, it might not sound like much, but in real estate terms, it's everything. What he thought he was selling wasn't what he actually had. And before he could list that house, every single one of those issues had to be fixed. Not patched, not hidden, fixed. I didn't see him much over the next few weeks. When I did, it was different. The confidence was gone, replaced by this tight, Controlled frustration that never quite boiled over, but never really settled either. Contractors started showing up, then more of them, trucks, tools, noise, the whole cycle of tearing things apart just to build them back the right way. The deck came down first. I watched that happen one Saturday morning. Boards getting pried up, railing dismantled piece by piece, the structure reduced to a pile of lumber on the ground. It had probably looked great in photos, added value, helped sell the place, but none of that mattered now. Then came the basement. Dumpsters in the driveway, drywall coming out, wires exposed, inspectors in and out, marking things, checking boxes. Windows had to be cut larger to meet code, which meant breaking through foundation walls, reframing, resealing, expensive, time-consuming work that you can't rush no matter how much you want to. All of it added up. Fast. I didn't gloat. Not outwardly, at least. I still kept to myself, did my usual routine, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something. Not joy exactly, but a kind of balance being restored. Like the scale had tipped too far one way, and now it was slowly, steadily coming back. But I wasn't done. The civil side of things still needed to be addressed. So I filed in small claims court. I asked for the maximum, $10,000. Not because I expected to get it all, but because I wanted the full scope of the damage recognized. I gathered everything, photos from day one, updated arborist reports, estimates, documentation of the additional harm from the topping, timelines showing repeated actions after being warned. When the court date came, Aaron showed up in a suit that looked like it hadn't been part of his plan for the day. He avoided eye contact at first, sat on the opposite side of the room, flipping through his own stack of papers like he might find a different outcome if he looked hard enough. When our case was called, we stood in front of the judge. No theatrics, no speeches, just facts. I explained what happened, step by step. Showed the photos. Let the arborist report speak where it needed to. I didn't exaggerate, didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. When it was his turn, he leaned heavily on the same argument he'd used at the door that first day, that anything crossing the property line was fair game, that he had a right to manage what affected his property. And the judge listened, really listened, then asked him one simple question. Did you cut beyond your side of the property line? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. And in that pause, you could feel the whole case settle into place. Yes, he said. That was it. The ruling came a few minutes later. Judgment in my favor. $7,500. Not the full 10, but enough to matter. Enough to make a point. When we walked out of that courtroom, he finally looked at me directly, and for a second, it felt like he might say something, maybe an apology, maybe frustration, maybe anything at all that resembled acknowledgement. But he didn't. He just nodded once, tight, controlled, and walked past me toward the exit. That was the last real interaction we had. By late fall, the work on his house was finally done. The deck rebuilt, properly permitted this time. Basement brought up to code. Inspections cleared. Paperwork clean. He listed the property in November. I remember seeing the sign go up, bright and optimistic, like none of the past months had happened. The listing photos looked good. They always do, wide angles, clean lines, careful lighting. But numbers don't lie. When it sold, it went for barely more than what he'd paid. After closing costs, after repairs, after fines, after the judgment, there wasn't much left, if anything at all. Winter came not long after that. The trees stood bare against the sky, quiet, still carrying the marks of what had been done to them. One of them, the topped one, it survived, but not the same. The shape was off, growth uneven, like it remembered. I still sit out back sometimes, even when it's cold, just for a few minutes. Coffee in hand, same as before, watching the light when there is any, thinking about how something so small, a few branches, a conversation that never happened, turned into all of that. And I think about him too. Because here's the part one keep coming back to. He wasn't wrong about one thing. Those branches were crossing into his yard. He did have a right, to a point. But there's a difference between having a right and knowing where it ends. He crossed that line. More than once. And in the end, that's what cost him. So I'll leave you with this. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have let it go, chalked it up to a bad neighbor and moved on? Because depending on who you ask, this is either a story about standing your ground or taking it too far. Let me know what you think.